In the frozen north, where mountains pierced the sky and fjords cut deep into the earth, there lay the village of Jotunheim. Its people were fierce, resilient, and bound by traditions older than memory. Children were trained in the arts of hunting, sailing, and battle before they could even lift a proper sword. And among these children was Ragnar, a boy whose spirit burned brighter than the hearth fires of the longhouses. Ragnar was no ordinary boy, though slight in build compared to the older warriors. His eyes held a storm, and his heart carried a restlessness that often led him far from the village, wandering cliffs, forests, and icy rivers. He was drawn to stories of gods and monsters, tales that Hildur, the village seer, whispered by firelight. She was a woman old as the mountains themselves, with eyes clouded by visions, yet sharp with wisdom. To her, Ragnar was different. She told him in riddles. A fire sleeps in the mountains, and the earth trembles in its dreaming. Only he who walks with courage and cunning may awaken it and survive. For years, Ragnar listened, learned, and trained. His father, Bjorn Ironside, a veteran of countless raids along foreign coasts, taught him swordplay, shieldcraft, and the discipline of war. Hildur taught him runes, omens, and the subtle signs that whispered the future. Ragnar learned to hunt silently, track without trace, and strike with precision. Yet even all his training could not quiet the hunger in his heart, a need to test himself against fate itself. Winter had been long and harsh, and as it finally began to retreat, shadows stirred in the north. Herds went missing. Forests burned in strange, unnatural places. Travelers spoke of a monstrous shadow gliding over the mountains at twilight. Fear gripped the village. The elders, wise and cautious, debated their next move. Then, standing in the longhouse, Ragnar declared, "I will face it. If it is a dragon that hunts our lands, let it know Jotunheim does not bow." Murmurs of doubt rippled through the hall, but Hildur's eyes gleamed with knowing. She placed her hand upon his shoulder and whispered, "The path you choose will carve your name into legend, Ragnar. But remember, the fire does not yield easily. The journey begins." Ragnar prepared with care. His sword, Frostfang, was forged from the finest steel in Jotunheim, its edge honed to a razor sharpness and engraved with runes for protection and swiftness. His shield bore the rune of Tawaz, symbolizing victory and righteous battle. A long cloak, thick with fur, shielded him from the northern winds that could strip flesh from bone. And at the fjord, his longship awaited, carved with dragon heads that glinted in the dawn light. The journey was perilous. Fjords narrowed into jagged cliffs. Mountain paths were slick with ice, and even the sun seemed reluctant to linger in the valleys. Along the way, Ragnar encountered signs of the beast he sought: scorched trees, enormous clawed tracks, and a stench of sulfur and fire that marked its passage. Birds fled in unnatural flocks, wolves howled without reason, and even the rivers seemed to hiss warnings. At night, Ragnar dreamed of Odin. One eye glimmered with wisdom, the other shrouded in shadow. "Ragnar," the All-Father spoke in a voice like wind through pines. "You seek glory, yet glory is not in killing alone. The dragon tests your mind, your courage, your very soul. Fail in one, and the world forgets your name." Ragnar awoke, heart pounding, and understood that brute strength alone would not be enough. Cunning, patience, and insight would be just as vital as sword and shield. First signs of the dragon. After days of climbing mountains, fording rivers, and traversing forests scarred by unnatural fire, Ragnar reached the valley of Jotunheim. Smoke curled from hidden fissures. Stones were blackened as though the earth itself had vomited flame. And there, at the highest peak, a shadow moved that no man had ever seen before. It was the dragon. Its scales glinted black as obsidian, jagged as shattered cliffs. Eyes burned molten gold. Its wings spanned wider than the fjord itself, and smoke hissed from its nostrils with every breath. Even from afar, the ground trembled under its weight. Ragnar felt fear, not the fear of death, but of insignificance before such a creature. Yet he reminded himself of Hildur's words and the teachings of his father. Courage is not the absence of fear, but mastery over it. He stepped forward, calling aloud, "I am Ragnar of Jotunheim. Face me, beast, and I shall not falter." The dragon's roar answered, splitting the air and shaking loose stones from cliff sides. Fire erupted in a torrent, scorching the valley floor. Ragnar rolled to safety, drawing Frostfang, shield raised. Clash of fire and steel. The dragon lunged. Ragnar dodged, striking at its legs, then its flanks. Each blow was deflected by the creature's scales, yet sparks flew with each contact. The dragon whipped its tail, sending boulders tumbling. Fire spewed, melting ice and singeing the earth. Hours passed in a deadly rhythm. Strike, dodge, study, strike again. Ragnar observed the creature, noting its movements, its patterns, its weaknesses. The dragon's underbelly, he realized, was protected by plates softer than the rest of its armor-like scales. But reaching it required skill, courage, and timing. Ragnar climbed cliffs, leapt across fissures, and finally drew the dragon toward a narrow canyon, where its wings could not fully unfurl. Feigning weakness, he baited it closer. Then, with a burst of strength and precision, he drove Frostfang into its underbelly. The dragon roared, thrashing violently, fire spewing uncontrollably, and rocks raining down. Ragnar held his ground, shield braced, muscles screaming. The battle raged until the first light of dawn, when Ragnar struck the final blow. The dragon's roar shook the sky one last time before it collapsed into the canyon, smoke curling from its body. Exhausted, scorched, and changed, Ragnar watched the creature's chest rise and fall one final time. Victory had been won, but at a cost. He had glimpsed the limits of mortal strength, the cunning of creatures older than man, and the weight of divine powers. Return and legacy. Ragnar returned to Skjoldheim a hero. Songs were sung, feasts held, and tales of his courage spread far and wide. Yet Ragnar was changed. He had faced fear, death, and the unknown, and had emerged not only alive, but wiser. Hilda greeted him with pride. You have walked the path of legends, Ragnar. Remember, courage without wisdom is flame without light. Ragnar placed Frostfang upon the altar of the gods and became a leader, teacher, and protector. He guided the next generation of warriors, teaching them that true strength lay in courage, wisdom, and respect for the powers that shaped the world. And thus, the saga of Ragnar and the fire of Jotunheim was etched into legend, a tale of bravery, cunning, and the enduring spirit of a Viking who dared to face a dragon and lived to tell the tale. The shadow of the gods. The morning after the battle, Ragnar lingered at the edge of the canyon, gazing at the fallen dragon. Smoke curled from its body, mixing with the mist of the northern valleys. Though victorious, he felt no triumph, only the weight of what lay ahead. The seer Hilder's words echoed in his mind. The fire sleeps, but it will burn for the brave. Ragnar understood now that dragons were only one thread of fate. He needed guidance. That night, beneath the aurora-lit sky, he entered a trance, invoking Odin. The All-Father appeared, riding a pale wind, one eye gleaming with knowledge. Ragnar, Odin's voice rumbled through the canyon. You have faced a beast of flame, yet your journey is only beginning. The paths of men are fraught with challenges that cannot be fought with steel alone. Wisdom, courage, and the blessings of the gods will shape the future you carve. Ragnar knelt in the snow, heart steady. I seek your guidance, All-Father. Show me the way. Odin's gaze pierced him. Seek the heart of Jotunheim. There lies the source of the dragon's fire, and the trial of your spirit. Beware the illusions that guard it, for the bravest hearts often falter in shadow. As Odin faded, Ragnar understood. This journey would be more than a battle of strength. It would test his mind, his resolve, and his understanding of the world. The Frostwolves of Skolheim. Before reaching the heart of Jotunheim, Ragnar had to cross the frozen plains of Skolheim, a land of windswept ice and jagged mountains. Travelers who had attempted the crossing never returned, and the wind itself seemed alive, carrying whispers of despair. On the third night, Ragnar heard a howl unlike any he had known. From the horizon emerged a pack of frostwolves, their fur silver as moonlight and eyes glowing blue. Legends spoke of these creatures as guardians of lost paths, sent by the gods to punish arrogance and test courage. The wolves circled, silent as shadows, frost mist rising from their breath. Ragnar readied Frostfang, shield at the ready, but Hilder's lessons guided him. Fight only when necessary. Observe always. The wolves attacked, swift and coordinated. Ragnar dodged with agility, striking only to deflect. He noticed their pattern. They always attacked in pairs, one feinting while the other struck. Using the terrain, he lured them onto a thin ice bridge, where their weight caused it to crack. One by one, they fell into the frozen river, claws scrabbling against ice before being swept away. The leader, larger than the rest, advanced cautiously, sensing Ragnar's skill and courage. Instead of fighting, Ragnar knelt and spoke words of respect. The wolf studied him, then howled, a sound that seemed to carry both approval and warning, before vanishing into the night. Ragnar realized he had earned a kind of blessing. Courage and cunning had triumphed without needless bloodshed. The Cave of Echoes. Days later, Ragnar reached the Cave of Echoes, said to be haunted by the spirits of warriors who had tried, and failed, to challenge the forces of Jotunheim. The entrance was jagged, dark, and foreboding. Every step echoed unnaturally, as if the cavern itself listened. Inside, illusions began to plague him. Shadows formed shapes of his friends, family, and past foes, speaking in voices both familiar and alien. They taunted him with doubt. You are weak. You will fall like the others. The dragon's fire is endless. Ragnar's training and discipline were tested. He closed his eyes, centered himself, and remembered the seer's words. The bravest hearts falter only when they forget who they are. He struck at the illusions with Frostfang, but the sword passed through, leaving the shadows unharmed. Then he realized the illusions were not physical threats. They were tests of mind and spirit. By affirming his purpose, his courage, and his resolve, the shadows dissipated one by one, leaving the cave silent. At the heart of the cave, a small pool reflected the aurora above. Its waters shimmered with strange energy, and Ragnar understood instinctively that this was a gift from the gods, clarity and foresight for the trials ahead. The Trial of Fire. Emerging from the cave, Ragnar reached the slopes of the heart of Jotunheim. Here, the land itself seemed alive with heat. Lava flowed through cracks, casting a red glow on cliffs and boulders. The wind carried ash and a distant roar that shook the mountains. This was where the dragon's power originated, the source of its flame and fury. Ragnar began the ascent. Rocks slid beneath his feet, molten streams hissed as they met snow, and he was forced to leap from ledge to ledge, testing his agility and strength. But the trial was not merely physical. Flames formed shapes, dragons, gods, monsters, each seeming to test his resolve, each whispering doubts and fears. Ragnar shouted, raising Frostfang to the sky. I am Ragnar of Skjoldheim. I face fear, fire, and fate, and I do not falter. For the first time, the flames recoiled, as if recognizing his courage. It was a test of heart and spirit, and Ragnar had passed. The mountain's fiery aura diminished, revealing a hidden plateau, the resting place of the dragon's horde, and the place where destiny awaited. Divine visions. On the plateau, Ragnar knelt to honor the gods, offering words of thanks and humility. As he prayed, visions appeared. Thor wielding Mjolnir to shield mortals from fire, Freya weaving threads of fate that shimmered through the air, and Odin watching from the world tree, guiding his hand. These visions gave Ragnar insight. The dragon's strength was immense, but it was not invincible. Knowledge, cunning, and the courage of a mortal heart could tip the scales. He saw flashes of the final battle, the maneuvers, the risks, the precision needed to strike at its underbelly. Ragnar rose, resolved and prepared. He had passed the trials, learned the lessons, and gained the blessing of the gods. The next step would be the ultimate confrontation, the final stage of the saga, the battle with the dragon itself. The dragon awakens. The plateau at the heart of Jotunheim was eerily silent. Smoke and ash swirled around blackened rocks, yet the air carried a strange stillness, as if the mountain itself held its breath. Ragnar tightened his grip on Frostfang, his shield steady, his eyes scanning the horizon. Suddenly, a tremor shook the ground. Rocks shifted. A low, guttural growl rolled through the air, vibrating against Ragnar's chest. From a fissure in the cliff, the dragon emerged, the true Jotunheim Wyrm. Its scales glimmered like blackened steel, eyes molten gold, wings spreading wide, casting shadows over the plateau. Smoke hissed from its nostrils, curling into the air like a living serpent. Ragnar felt a surge of fear, but he drew upon every lesson learned, from Hildur, from Odin, from his father. "Courage without wisdom is flame without light," he whispered. This would not be a battle of brute force alone. It would be a test of mind, strategy, and spirit. Stage 1. Fire and Flight. The dragon unleashed its first attack, a torrent of fire that blazed across the plateau. Ragnar rolled behind a jagged boulder, feeling the heat singe his cloak. He observed the creature. Its wings beat in a powerful rhythm. Its fire followed predictable arcs, yet its eyes were intelligent, calculating. Ragnar struck at its legs as it landed, sparks flying from his sword against thick scales. The dragon reared, whipping its tail with such force that boulders toppled around him. He dodged, climbed, and countered, each move measured, each strike testing the creature's defenses. The first stage was brutal but deliberate. Ragnar's aim was not yet to kill. He needed to study the dragon, to understand its strengths and weaknesses. By the end of the day, the WRM was wary, circling the plateau cautiously, while Ragnar, bruised but unbroken, readied for the next stage. Stage 2. The Dance of Shadows. As night fell, the moon illuminated the dragon in silver and black. Shadows danced across the plateau, creating illusions of multiple dragons. Ragnar realized the creature's cunning. It was trying to confuse him, to make him strike blindly. Ragnar closed his eyes briefly, centering himself. He listened, not to the shadows, but to the true rhythm of the beast, the hiss of its breath, the scrape of its claws, the subtle shift in its weight before every attack. With this understanding, he moved with precision. He feigned a stumble, luring the dragon into a trap he had prepared with jagged rocks and fissures. The dragon's claws struck the stones, causing a cascade of rocks that pinned one of its legs temporarily. Ragnar seized the moment, driving Frostfang into the underbelly. A strike met with a roar that shook the sky. The dragon thrashed violently, wings battering the plateau, fire erupting wildly. Ragnar barely avoided a tail sweep that could have crushed a mountain. He realized the battle would demand everything: courage, skill, cunning, and the favor of the gods. Stage 3. The Flight of Fire. As dawn approached, the dragon took to the air, wings slicing through the clouds. Ragnar climbed a jagged peak, heart pounding, eyes fixed on his foe. The dragon's fire rained down, scorching rocks and melting ice. Ragnar leapt between cliffs, timing his attacks perfectly, striking at scales he had identified as weaker. Divine visions returned. Thor hurling Mjolnir, Freya weaving fate, Odin watching from Yggdrasil. The god's presence bolstered his spirit. He shouted, "I am Ragnar of Skjoldheim. Your fire will not break me." The dragon dove, talons extended. Ragnar rolled, driving Frostfang into its wing joint. Sparks flew, smoke hissed, and the dragon's roar echoed like thunder. The creature faltered midair, landing heavily on the plateau. Ragnar pressed the attack, careful to avoid fire and claw. This stage pushed him to the limits of endurance. His muscles screamed, his skin burned from heat, but his mind remained sharp. He was learning the rhythm of the WRM, predicting its strikes, and striking at its vulnerable points. Stage 4. Heart of the Beast. The final stage was the most perilous. Ragnar had drawn the dragon to a narrow canyon, where its wings could not fully unfurl. Fire hissed from molten fissures, and the earth quaked with the creature's every move. Ragnar feigned weakness, baiting the dragon closer. The WRM lunged, jaws open, flames spewing. Ragnar leapt to the side, rolling under the fire, shield raised, and struck with Frostfang at the soft underbelly. The dragon screamed, fire exploding uncontrollably, tail lashing, claws scraping stone. When Ragnar appeared at the fjord, villagers rushed to greet him. Their eyes were wide with wonder, respect, and disbelief. Mothers held their children close, warriors bowed, and the elders nodded solemnly. Hildur, the seer, stepped forward, her eyes bright with pride. "You have walked the path of legends, Ragnar," she said, voice trembling. "The dragon sleeps forever, yet your journey does not end here. The courage you have shown, the wisdom you have earned, it is a light that will guide generations." Ragnar placed the dragon's scale upon the altar of the gods in the village hall, a reminder of both danger and triumph. Frostfang, scarred from battle, was cleaned, polished, and returned to its resting place beside the altar. Celebration and reflection. The village celebrated for days. Feasts were held with roasted meats, fresh fish, and ale brewed from the valley's barley. Skalds recounted Ragnar's deeds in song, praising his courage, strategy, and devotion to the gods. Children hung on every word, dreaming of one day emulating the hero who had faced the dragon of Jotunheim and lived. Yet Ragnar did not bask in glory alone. He walked among the people, speaking with elders, helping with repairs, and ensuring that the village learned from his journey. Victory, he understood, was not only the defeat of a foe but the strengthening of the community, the passing on of wisdom, and the nurturing of courage in others. He often sat by the fjord at dawn, reflecting on the trials he had endured. He remembered the frost wolves of Skolheim, the illusions of the Cave of Echoes, and the final clash with the dragon. Each challenge had taught him something essential: patience, cunning, endurance, humility, and respect for powers far greater than any human. Visions and the god's blessing. One night, beneath a sky ablaze with auroras, Ragnar received a vision. Thor appeared, hammer in hand, standing among rolling clouds of fire and lightning. Freya appeared beside him, threads of fate shimmering in her hands, weaving the destinies of men. Odin watched from Yggdrasil, the world tree, his gaze both piercing and benevolent. Ragnar of Skjoldheim, Odin intoned, "You have faced fire, shadow, and fear, and have emerged worthy. Remember, a hero's path is never finished. Your deeds will inspire, your wisdom will guide, and your courage will echo through the ages." Thor raised Mjolnir, and the heavens rumbled as lightning struck nearby peaks. Freya's threads glowed, showing Ragnar visions of generations to come, warriors who would carry forward his lessons, leaders who would rise, and communities strengthened by the stories of bravery. Ragnar knelt, offering thanks. He understood that he had not acted for fame, but in service to the gods, his people, and the world's balance. The dragon's defeat was a victory, yes, but the true triumph lay in the harmony he had preserved and the example he had set. Mentor and leader. Years passed, and Ragnar grew into a wise leader of Skjoldheim. He trained new warriors, passing on the lessons he had learned: courage tempered by wisdom, strength guided by strategy, and reverence for powers beyond human understanding. Frostfang remained by the altar, a symbol of both the dangers that lurked in the world and the potential for heroism in those willing to face them. Hilda often watched him, smiling. She had known his path from the beginning, yet she marveled at the fullness of his journey, the trials, the victories, and the legacy he was creating. Skalds continued to sing of Ragnar and the fire of Jotunheim, tales stretching across fjords and mountains into lands beyond the sea. Travelers carried his story, weaving it into the fabric of history. And in every retelling, the lessons endured: bravery, wisdom, and the courage to face destiny head-on. A legacy etched in legend. Ragnar lived to see many winters. He walked the fjords, guided warriors, and ensured that Skjoldheim thrived in peace and strength. He would often climb the cliffs overlooking the valley where the dragon had fallen, gazing at the canyon and remembering the trials that had forged him. The dragon of Jotunheim became a legend not merely of terror, but of challenge overcome, a story to remind mortals that courage, strategy, and wisdom could triumph even against the mightiest forces. Ragnar's name was etched into the sagas, his deeds told by skalds for generations. And thus,